Hi friends, welcome back for another D8 Virtual Youth Workshop. I'm Terry Fender, your ARBA District 8 Director. This evening we're having our second of two consecutive Cavy virtual conferences. This past Saturday we traveled over to Maryland and watched Judge Faye Storm speak on preparing your cavies for show. Well, this week, the Canadian and the U.S. borders may be closed, but we're still going to speak over there virtually. We're going to be joined by Judge Mary Lou Eisel of Ontario, and Mary Lou is going to be speaking on cavies, husbandry, and nutrition. Now, I would like to point out, this is husbandry, not wifery. I'm sorry for the bad joke. Anyway, just a little about Mary Lou. She's probably got dual citizenship. I see her here in the States an awful lot. She's a longtime Cavy breeder, longtime Cavy judge, former president of the ACBA, member of the Cavy Standards Committee, and a lot of you might not know this, but on her spare time, she also plays shortstop for the Toronto Blue Jays. She's a pretty well-rounded person there. So we're very happy to have Mary Lou this evening, and again, Cavy's Husbandry and Nutrition. With that, we're going to go up to Ontario. Mary Lou, it's all yours.
Hi there. This is a huge topic, and I know that I'm not going to be able to cover all of it. Hopefully, we'll hit some of the highlights and do a little bit of detailed stuff in some areas, but not really in a lot of areas. First thing we want to discuss is the origins of your cavy. Cavies can't come from South America, from the country of Peru. I feel it's important to know the origins of the animal to appreciate its needs. And cavies have been a food source down there in South America for 10,000 years. Their natural habitat is in the Andes Mountains. The climate and environment that the animal developed in dictates its environmental and nutritional needs. So you have an animal that originated in a climate that was very rugged, rather a cool climate. Over on the right side of the picture, you see a drawing that was done. That's the earliest one I could find. I believe it's from the 1600s. This is what the early cavies looked like. You can see some similarities between our modern day cavies and quite a few differences as well. We'll go on to the next slide. We're going to talk about the basic needs for any animal, whether it's four-legged or two-legged or whatever. It's the first need for life is oxygen and fresh air to breathe. Without that, there is no life. Your second need is water. You have to have water. You can go without food for a lot longer than you can go without water. And the third need for life is a steady supply of nutritious food. And the fourth need for life is shelter with proper and clean conditions. Go on to the next slide. We're going to talk about air. Considering that cavies are from a mountainous area, it's not surprising that they tolerate the cold a lot better than they tolerate heat. They have a fairly wide range of acceptable temperature. Ideally, the temperature should be between 65. We need to move that on to the next slide. Temperature should be between 65 and 75. They struggle at temperatures above 90 degrees. Hard time breathing. They don't want to eat. They're very prone to heat stroke when temperatures get that warm. They can tolerate temperatures below freezing. They don't thrive as well, though. There's some breeders many years ago, not so much now, who actually kept their cavies in unheated barns, and the animals did not bad. Ideal humidity level for cavies is around 50%. Depending on your climate, if you're up here in Ontario, the Great Lakes area is very humid, you may very well need a dehumidifier to keep the air proper. If you're down in the desert region, the US Southwest, you may need to have a humidifier to keep the humidity at a good level for your cavies. And air quality is extremely important for cavies. They produce a lot of ammonia, and there's no better way to achieve that than with good air movement and frequent cleaning of cages to prevent the buildup of that ammonia. It's recommended that there be 10 to 15 changes of air per hour, and you never recirculate air that has not been filtered to remove any contaminants. Next slide, is going to talk about water. These are the most common types of watering units for cavies: bottles, bowls, and automatic system. Each has their pros and cons. The most important consideration is the availability and the quality of the water. There's one other system that I haven't pictured here that is rarely used, but I have seen it used, and that is giving your cavies a lot of high water content vegetables and no water at all in their diet. Next slide. Most people who have cavies use the bottles. It's easy to control the quality of the water when it's housed within a bottle. But bottles could drip, make for wet cages. Also, some cavies, they'll play with those bottles and that makes your cages very wet. The bottles do need to be washed frequently, particularly if you use an additive in the water, a vitamin or electrolyte additive, because bottles do tend to get a little gunky. I like those big wide mouth bottles because they're much easier to get in and clean out than the narrow mouth bottles. With bottles, you could monitor the consumption of water. You get to see if is the cavie drinking, is it not drinking. If the level of the water doesn't drop in the bottle, that could be a concern because it may mean that little metal ball of the spout is not properly in place. Cavies, they're very prone to backwashing into the spout, and that can plug up the little balls, or you can get shavings up into the spout, and that can again cause a problem with the little ball. So just take the lid off, wash it out, make sure that there's nothing in the spout, put it back, and keep an eye on the animals, make sure that they are drinking. Next slide. Automatic watering system. These are convenient. All you need to do is just add water to that bucket, which is kept at a high level because the whole system works on gravity. So you keep the bucket up high, let the water run down through the tubing to the cages and a little nozzle that the animal drinks out of. I don't suggest putting anything in the water because the tubing can then become gummed up and it's really hard to clean out. Cavies will play with those spouts sometimes, and you get a wet cage. If they happen to chew a hole in the tubing, then all that water that's in the bucket will leak out all at once. That could really flood your cage. Some people put little cups under the spouts, and that will catch any drips, making for drier cages. Water bowls, it's the last method we're going to talk about. They have to be heavy to prevent tipping, or can be attached to the cage so that they don't get knocked off. I rarely use a bowl for cavies unless I have one that for whatever reason has not been drinking from the bottle. It's been a lifesaver on occasion. Sometimes newly weaned cavies, they don't quite know yet how to drink in that, but if you give them an open container of water, they will go drink out of that as opposed to a bottle. Or if the bottle has got a stuck nozzle, then the bowl can be a real benefit for them. Water bowls, though, they are messy. They get full of shavings, fecal pellets. You might have to change them more than once a day just to keep them clean. Next thing we're going to look at is nutrition. Up there in that upper right-hand corner, this is a wild cavy, and he's rather a interesting looking fellow, I guess you could say. But cavies have a simple monogastric digestive system. They're herbivores, hence they're browsers. Cavies and primates are the only species that require vitamin C in their diet. And this is very important to remember. They cannot produce vitamin C themselves. They need it to source their vitamin C through their diet. diet in the wild would consist of fruits, leaves, plants, root vegetables, grasses. And this is important to remember when we formulate our feeding regime for our domestic cavies. Diet in captivity is normally a pelleted feed, various fruits and vegetables, and hay. Next slide shows what I mean by a monogastric system. If we could look into the cavy, this is what their system would look like. Food passes from the mouth into that blue esophagus, down into the green stomach, and then on through the intestines and rectum. And for the sake of nutrition, a monogastric system cannot digest fiber as well as a ruminant, such as a cow, and they require a higher level of protein in their diet. Our next slide. This is the nutritional requirements for a guinea pig. A guinea pig requires a protein level of 18 to 20%, fiber level of 10 to 16%, only a 3% fat level. Vitamin C should be 0.5 milligrams per 100 grams of body weight. You can get vitamin C crystals. You can purchase them. I get mine online. You add it to the water at the rate of 1/8 teaspoon per gallon. Calcium requirements for guinea pigs are 8 to 10 grams per kilo. Magnesium, 1 to 3 grams per kilo. Potassium, 5 to 14 grams per kilo. That is the amount of grams consumed per kilo of body weight. Our next slide is going to show us some feed bag labels from different feeds. We have the Callback Cavy pellet. We have the Purina Lab Chow, this is commonly known as Lab Chow 5025, and the Missouri feed bag label. And if you look at those, they all list the protein level, the fat level, the fiber level, your different vitamins and minerals. There's always a list of ingredients, and some of them include some feeding directions like that one in the middle does. Our next slide, we're going to discuss how to interpret those labels. The labels are required to list the nutritional value of the feed and the contents of the feed. The percent of protein, fiber, fat will be listed, plus often minerals, vitamins. And you refer back to that nutrition slide before, you will see how well these feeds match the requirements of the animals. Our modern animal feeds are formulated to meet the nutritional needs of the species, but there are often differences from one feed to the next. Ingredients are always listed in the quantity in the formula. So the first item listed is dehydrated alfalfa meal, then that means there's more of that in it than any other of the ingredients. A couple of slides further, we're going to look at the situation of grass, timothy versus alfalfa as a feed source for cavies, because you'll notice that some of those labels say that they are pelleted alfalfa meal and others it's pelleted timothy hay. Our next slide, feeding cavies. Cavies are best free-fed. I know with rabbits that you have to restrict their feed intake or they will overeat and become pudgy, but cavies are best free-fed. A good rule of thumb is 1/8 cup of pellets per cavy per day. If they are finishing all their feed, you up the amount. If they still have feed left, cut back a little bit. Hay can be free-fed with no issues. They will rarely overeat on hay. The only concern I have is that if they don't eat it, it gets packed on the bottom of the cage and urine soaked and kind of messy. Vegetables, other fresh foods should be introduced gradually. You should never be a substitute for a well balanced pelleted ration. Dangers of introducing too rapidly, introducing a new food too rapidly or in too great a quantity, of course, is always diarrhea. Can cavies be fed rabbit pellets? This is a common question. For some breeders, there's not a good source of quality cavy feed. Up here in Ontario, there are only 2 cavy feeds that we can get, for example. I have to drive an hour to get my cavy feed, so it can be a concern that you just don't have a supply of cavy feed. You can use rabbit pellets, but you always remember there's no added vitamin C in rabbit pellets. They also are higher as a rule in calcium than cavy pellets. High calcium levels can lead to kidney or bladder stones in cavies. If you feed rabbit pellets, don't feed them alfalfa hay. Alfalfa is very, very high in calcium. Personally, I mix feed. This was recommended to me many years ago by a long-time cavy person. I mix 3 parts cavy pellets, 3 parts rabbit pellets. It's made by a different company than my cavy pellets is made by. 1 part sweet horse grain mix, 1 small scoop of soybean meal. That way, if there's ever an issue with one of your pellets, I know a few years ago, cavy pellets, there was too much vitamin D in them and it caused huge amounts of deaths. There was another rather recent episode where the vitamin premix that they put in was contaminated and caused a lot of issues in cavies and other species as well, because apparently this mix was being used in many different kinds of feeds. So if you mix your feed, you're going to minimize any impact that any poor feed issues will have on your herd. Like I said earlier, it takes me an hour to get to the feed mill to get my feed. We have blizzard up here. I may not be able to get my cavy feed. If I'm running short on the pellets, I know that I can add a little bit more rabbit to the mix, and the animals will not be adversely affected by that change in their diet. Our next slide, we're going to look at Timothy versus alfalfa. That alfalfa on the right, it looks lovely and green, but you have to feed alfalfa with caution to cavies. They can consume some alfalfa, but it's much higher in calcium than Timothy and other grass hays. Alfalfa is also very prone to having woody stems in it, and they get pokes in the eye, or sometimes they can be the cause of abscesses in their mouth and throat. I've heard it said too that cavies have to have hay. The answer to that is no, they do not have to have hay. I know of a few breeders who have very bad allergies themselves to hay. They don't use hay and their animals thrive. Hay or hay cubes, they do give good chewing activity though for cavies, keep them busy. Next slide, we're going to look at vegetables and fruits. Cavies love fresh vegetables and fruits, including fresh grasses. Dandelions are a real favorite as well. You always introduce new feeds sparingly. There's many resources available. I'm not going to list. It goes on for pages. The lists of recommended vegetables and greens that you can feed to cavies, and the list that you cannot feed to cavies. Always ensure that your fresh produce is free of herbicides and or pesticides. Fresh foods can also be an excellent source of vitamin C and fluids. One fallacy I've heard is that iceberg lettuce is toxic to cavies. Essentially, it has no nutritional value, but it's not toxic. It's very high in water content. It's almost exclusively water, and cavies do love to eat it. So if you want to give them a little thrill and throw them in a bit of lettuce, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt them. It's going to give them some entertainment and something to chew on. But you never allow those fresh foods to substitute for a balanced pelleted diet. That's very important. Our next slide, housing and bedding. This is a setup from a meat producer in South America. They use almost exclusively floor pans with dirt floors. Go to our next slide. These are your most common ways that people house cavies. Your wire stacker, you can get metal or plastic pans. It's probably the most common type of housing in the show world. They're easy to clean. You maximize your use of space. Plastic cages with coated wire tops. They take up a lot of space. They're hard to clean. You have to take all the animals out of it and dump it out, and put it all back together. CNC cages, these clip together units. I find they're cumbersome. They're great if you just have a few pets, but they're not really very practical for a breeding and show herd. If you get, 50 animals and you have them all housed in these little CNC cages or big CNC cages, most of them are quite expensive. You have to kind of get in and like clean that all out by hand with your little dustpan, and it's kind of messy. Plastic totes. I'll first say, when I first got the cavies, there were no such thing as plastic totes. I had 4-foot-long aquariums that I kept my young, freshly weaned animals in. Talk about heavy when those things were full of used cavy shavings. But now we have plastic totes. They do take up a lot of space. They're great if you just have a few animals and they're in your house. You don't get bedding all over like you do with wire cages. Airflow, though, can be an issue. As we discussed earlier, airflow is very, very important for healthy cavies. On to our next slide. This is a homemade cage, wood cage. I really don't recommend wood for the use with housing cavies. There's been a new strain of a fungus around. It's virtually impossible to eliminate from wood. If there is no other option, you have to use a homemade wood cage. That wood has to be sealed or your urine will soak in. You cause humidity issues for the animals and a breeding ground for any fungus or bacteria that might be going around. Wood cages are also very, very heavy. Our next slide, just a little bit touching on some housing issues. Cavies are normally colony bred, anything from a pair to a large group of sows with one boar. Cavies are herd animals. They like being together. Unlike the rabbits where they're all in their each individual hole, the cavies like being together in a unit. There are different schools of thought on whether sows should be bred back. They do have a heat cycle within hours of delivery, and they can be bred if they are still with the boar when they litter. Do what works for you. Some people are adamant that a sow should never be bred back, and others feel that they don't want to disrupt the family unit, that if your sows are healthy, then breeding back will not cause an issue for them. But you have to do what's right for you and what works for you. Show cavies, the long-haired ones in particular, should be kept in their own cage to prevent damage to the coat. Cage size, this is another one that has a lot of varied schools of thought. Common rule of thumb is 2 square feet per cavy, adding 1 square foot per additional cavy. This is a minimum size. More space is definitely better, but again, do what works for you. If you want to, I once had a woman who got 2 cavies from me. She wanted to get a third one, didn't know she had enough room. I said, well, how big's the area you keep them in? She says, well, they're in my dining room. I said, oh, they'll be fine to add a third animal. 3 animals to your dining room is not going to be too crowded for them. I'm not so sure I would want guinea pigs running around my dining room, but that was, where she kept hers. Next slide, we're going to look at flooring and bedding. Cavies should never be kept on wire. They have little feet. They have delicate bones. Those feet can get caught in the wire. They can break their legs. But if you don't use, or if you have the animals on a bare surface, you do need to have bedding in the cage. And that bedding has to be changed at least once a week. Next slide, we're going to look at some of our types of bedding that are available for us. We have pine or aspen shavings. You never use cedar shavings. There's oils in cedar that are not good for cavies. These softwood shavings are readily available. They're inexpensive. Disposal can be a problem. I know where we are, we're limited to 2 bags of garbage trash per week. I compost my shavings. We're zone agriculture, so it's no problem to do such a thing here. Shavings are also easily caught in the coat, so if you have long coated cavies, you're trying to coat them out, shavings might not be a good option for you. Wood pellets. They're readily available. They're inexpensive. Disposal again could be an issue. They're very, very heavy though. My back does not like carriers full of wood shavings. They are a great option though for a cavy and coat because the wood pellet does not get caught in the coat. Paper bedding. That's a bit harder to find. Usually you'll have to go to like a pet shop or something. Not all feed mills will carry a paper bedding. It is expensive. It's very light and it's great for animals in coat. Fleece. This is a good option if you have a small number of animals because it does need frequent laundering. It's inexpensive and easy to make if you're so inclined. Minimal amount of waste to dispose of. My daughter used fleece when she had her show animals in her apartment in Toronto. She just had 8 cages, so it was no big issue to have to deal with washing the fleece from 8 cages 2 or 3 times a week or whatever it required. And your disposal, you just dump the little stool pellets off the fleece and takes up very little space in your trash. Next slide, we're going to look at other husbandry needs. Grooming. This is actually a huge topic on its own, so I'll only just briefly touch on a few things. Always remember you're dealing with a show animal. As such, they should be kept clean. Cavies can be bathed. Most breeds of cavies can be bathed. Exception would be an Abbey, Texel. But you allow for a few days before a show for that natural oil to return to their coat. Long-haired cavies have their own special grooming needs. I'm not going to get into that, but they do have to be brushed, combed, wrapped. And I cannot stress enough the importance of trimming nails. Long nails interfere with posing. If the judge can't get your animal to pose correctly, they're never going to be able to make an accurate assessment on your animal. Keep an eye on your breeding cavies as well, because those long nails can become twisted and even get pulled right out if they get too long. We got a little diagram at the bottom here. It shows you can just use human nail cutters, or you can use cat nail trimmers and snip, snip, snip those little nails. Just take that little tip off the end like you're showing on the right, and you're good to go. On to the next slide. Carry on with our husbandry issues. Medical. This again is another whole topic unto itself. I'm not going to spend much time on it as it is its own topic basically. Cavies are basically healthy little animals. The best medical advice that I can give you is keep them healthy. Take care of them properly, feed them properly, keep them clean. Practice good preventative measures. Parasites and fungus. Cavies can pick up lice, burrowing mites, fur mites, fungus, which is also ringworm is a type of fungus, very easily from infected animals. You pick it up at shows. Always be vigilant. Have a good preventative regime. There are different products that you can use to treat or prevent parasites, and just be faithful with your program for that. Breeding is another huge topic. We did discuss quality breeding earlier. Your cavie gestation is around 70 days. Pups are born very precocious. Their eyes are open. They're fully haired. They start eating solid food within hours of birth, but they still need their mother's milk. Sows will start coming into heat as young as 3 weeks of age. Boars sexually mature as early as 6 weeks. I know you get the odd person that says, well, my 3-week-old boar bred his mother. Yeah, you do get some early bloomers, but those are few and far between. And most breeders will wean their pups at 3 to 4 weeks. Baby sows could probably be left with their mama a lot longer than that. If you do pull the boar out, then it's not an issue to leave those babies in with mama. And our next slide. Some suggested resources for you. Join the ARBA and join the ACBA. Both have good publications, good websites. There's a whole series of Cavy care articles on the ACBA website. It's acbaonline.net, I believe. Find a good mentor that will help you. I'm sure when I was first into Cavies, I drove some people nuts. But, you know, find a good mentor and that will talk with you and discuss with you your problems, your concerns, your exciting new litters, your up-and-coming show hopefuls. I've got a couple of good friends here in Ontario that don't live too far away, and we can get together and talk about guinea pigs for hours and hours and hours. Cautiously use the information that you find on the internet. It's not always accurate. Like I said, a good mentor is much more valuable than the internet. And as a final note, as with any domestic animal, you are in full control of its well-being. You've taken this animal, you've put it in a cage. It has no option to seek its own environment. And well-bred, well-cared for animals will always do better on a show table. Thank you. And I think Terry's ready to entertain any questions. He's going to pass them on to me.
All righty, everybody. Please, for our viewers out there with questions, please go ahead and type them in and send them in. And Amanda at our control center will read those out to Mary Lou. And also, while you're at it, please chime in with your location, your city, state, province. It's always great to find out where our viewers are coming from. While we're waiting on some questions that come in, Mary Lou, I might have one short one here. That's coming from a short guy too. For the parents out there who've got their young kids starting in 4-H, and say maybe like 8, 9, 10 years old, is there any breed that you'd say is a good starter breed for them that maybe is a little easier to care for or would be a good learning experience for the young people?
Okay, I always recommend to parents to allow the child, with certain limitations, to go with something that they like, that they themselves like, because you're not just showing this animal, you are every day, every single day, whether you want to or not, you are feeding this animal, watering it, looking after it, cleaning it. You have to like what you're looking at. So if the child likes that boring white Cavy and the parents like the pretty flashy 3-colored one, let the child get the white one. I would strongly suggest that as a first choice, people go with the Americans. They're your basic short-haired animal. I don't find that they're any easier to breed because every breed has its own specific requirements and specific challenges. Your Americans are more challenging, I find, in the breed pen because you're trying to breed to produce a winner. Your long hairs, you also have that challenge of breeding, but you also have the challenge of keeping that coat up. You get into your Abyssinians. They're another fairly good starter breed, but they are very challenging with that specific to requirements on their rosettes and their ridges. But the American would be my suggestion. I don't suggest long-haired cavies for children. I have my own thoughts on parent involvement. I feel it is very important. The parents do have to be involved. I have no issues at all with parents helping their youngsters grooming their cavies, particularly the long-haired cavies, because I don't want to see that animal brushed to the point where it has no coat left. But I also feel that the children should use it, the parents, I guess, should use it as a learning experience in teaching the child how to care for the animal and not perennially doing the work themselves. So it's kind of there's a fine line there between what we as parents should be doing as far as participation. My dog wants to join the video. There's rather a fine line between what we should do as good parents to encourage our children and help them, but allowing them the freedom to learn and develop their own skills in taking care of their animals. Sorry, that was a long answer, Terry.
Oh, no, I like that. And one thing you said that really makes me think back to some of when I'm doing seminars for the 4-H rabbit kids is when they ask you something like that, I always tell them about the same thing. Yeah, you got to use a little common sense sometimes, but try and get what the young person likes, because if mom and dad, relives 4-H through them and gets what they like, probably that young person's not going to put as much effort. But within reason, if you get what the young person likes, they're probably going to do a little more work and spend time with it. So I think that goes across species lines, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
All right, Amanda, while we were talking here, have you got any questions, locations, anything like that coming into the control center?
I do. I'm going to note to Mary Lou that you have quite the humorous fan base following you. It's a good thing I was on mute, because there was quite a few times I was laughing while you were talking.
Okay.
As far as check-ins go, it looks like I've got people in here from Michigan, Indiana, California, Kentucky, Delaware, somewhere west of the Mississippi. And I believe that's kind of maybe around Arizona.
Okay. I know exactly where in Arizona that is, but that's okay.
I'm pretty sure you do. I think we had Indonesia was a like on there, New Jersey, and we actually have a faithful watcher is from Ontario.
Okay.
And let's see here. I think that's about all of my things. I got to go through all of the little chatting here. As far as questions go, oh, I got an Oregon that just popped up. And let's see here. You're loving watching the educational stuff. And then there was a comment on here that has excellent advice to mix feeds. I always try to do that, and it saved me several times when one of the feed companies put a little too much of something vital in the feed and others lost many animals. About the soybean meal, can you elaborate on that? Because one of our viewers has never heard about the soybean meal.
Right. Okay, because I mix feeds, my Cavy feed runs, I think, 20% protein. The rabbit feed runs 16% protein. So it's kind of got to balance out that the cavies aren't getting as much protein as good for diet. By adding a small amount of soybean meal, which is 48% protein, I really was going to elaborate on this in the talk and then forgot about it. A soybean meal, I believe, is 48% protein. Just adding, it's a very small amount. It boosts that protein level up. My dog wants to join the party. I was having some issues with skin trouble with sows. Their skin was getting very dry and split. Adding the soybean meal has solved that problem.
Let's see here. I'm not sure. You've got, like I said, you've got the fan base. Let's see. Someone wants to know off topic why you never age. Like I'm telling you.
I started out old.
Like I'm telling you, I was having problems. I've got lots of comments on here. And someone never knew that Cavy's barked. This was the kind of stuff I was going through. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, this is going to be available. This video will be available on YouTube later, and you can also watch it back on Facebook Live. And we also had somebody coming in and chiming in from Wyoming. And we have one that wants to know what breed has the most personality.
That depends on what you define as personality. Abbies they're little pistols. They're very active. Your long-haired Cavies tend to be a little lumpish, and I think perhaps that as breeders we have selected for that because we want an animal that's going to sit on a show board and be good while we groom it. And I think we kind of maybe don't include into our herd the animals that are more active and more rambunctious. I'm not saying that they don't have personality, they just have a different personality. They're more mellow. Texels are busy. They're inquisitive. I don't know why they might be different from others. Teddies, I find, have a unique personality too. I guess there's probably more difference in personality from one animal to another than from one breed to another. A lot depends on how much you interact with them too, I think.
And we have on here, is there a difference in the shavings, aspen versus the pine, for example? What about shavings? I think from wet areas, dried during, hold on. Yeah, talk about your shavings again.
Talk about shavings again.
Yeah.
Okay, most of our shavings that we use are pine shavings. They're kiln dried. That will help with the moisture level of them. Some of them do have a higher oil content. I'm sure if you've opened a bag sometimes and smells like Christmas, it's got a high oil content in the pine in that particular lot. I know I see regional differences. Some areas, they're like huge, big, hard chunks of wood in the shavings, and other areas it's very light and fluffy. I like light and fluffy. The big hard lumps don't absorb as well. But yeah, there are differences. If you pick up the bag and it's very heavy, don't buy that bag. That bag is probably gotten wet somehow and it won't absorb as well because it is wet. But, yeah, basically most shavings that we use are pine shavings. I have used aspen. I find aspen's really, really bad for getting caught in the long hair coats.
Okay, and I've got on here, someone wants to know what varieties do you personally own and breed?
Okay, I have mostly Americans. I have them in tan, marten, black, and what we call facetiously call rainbow. It's a lilac, orange, and white broken color. I also have those in satin. I have silkies in broken, and I've got this unicorn thing I'm working on. It's a satin white crested cow pattern. So far I have produced one, It didn't live to maturity though, so we're still working on that project.
And do you have anything, Terry, while I'm waiting for Facebook?
Okay, well, I might talk about what's coming up here on our future workshops, and maybe that'll give a little more time for people to chime in. And again, let's hear where you're from, any questions you might have. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed. We've done 2 consecutive Cavy workshops, and hopefully the Cavy folks enjoyed that. Plus our rabbit people, it's always great to see both sides of the hobby there, and trying to cover both sides there for you. Looking out to our next workshop, we've done, of course, 2 consecutive Cavies. Our next one will be going back to the rabbit side of things, and that'll be on July the 27th at 7 p.m. July the 27th at 7 p.m. And actually, we're going to do a breed of rabbit that actually was one of my breeds my first year in 4-H. That was probably 2 or 3 years ago. And our speaker is going to be a judge that is a past District 8 director, a past ARBA vice president, and also he's currently on the ARBA Standards Committee. And that'll be Judge Bruce Ormsby out of Indiana. Bruce was nice enough to do one of our live events last fall at a show in Kentucky. And now he's going to join us virtually for a workshop here. And he's going to talk on, as I said, a breed that I started with, and that's Palominos. Used to, we saw a lot of them here in my area, but these days you don't see quite as many. There's some really good ones when you see them, but we just don't see them as much as we used to. And I wanted to get this breed covered, and Bruce was nice enough to say yes. So please join us July 27th, 7 p.m. as Judge Bruce Ormsby speaks on Palominos. And hopefully everyone will find that interesting. Bruce has always done a great job for us, and I know he'll do another one here. I would like to remind everybody of our YouTube channel. Amanda mentioned it briefly already. The District 8 YouTube channel is called ARBA D8 website. Give Amanda a few days and this video will be up there as well. So far, we'll have every video that we've done virtually will be up on our D8 YouTube channel, plus a handful or so of our live events last year is going to be there. So please drop by and check it out. Amanda, do you have any more questions coming in?
Well, I don't have any more questions that have come in, but apparently Mary Lou's dog has a fan club.
Oh, all right.
Yes.
And Mr. Guy from Indiana would love to see Badger on the screen before you get off.
There he is. Watching.
Did you say, was that Uncle Jim in Indiana saying that?
Oh, yeah.
Uncle Jim, all right. Anything else coming in, Amanda?
We had a North Carolina that popped in that's like viewing it. So there's
Excellent.
another state. And Badger is cute. The comment that I have.
Did you say Terry is cute?
No, I didn't.
Oh, man, denied.
Harry.
All righty. Anything else, Amanda?
I do have a comment, but I'm trying to figure out how to interpret it.
Okay.
Okay. So what is your experience with crossing your cavies over the border?
Okay, there's no restrictions on cavies crossing the border. Cavies or rabbits, I'm getting a little worried though with the RHD2 that there may be concerns about rabbits crossing the border. They have no health requirements. They don't need a health certificate. They don't need vaccinations. If the border authority wish to, they can refuse entry of your animals. I've had that happen once where I was going to a show with my daughter out in, we're actually going to do a big show, a big thing. She was working on her judge license at the time. We were going to, she was going to go do an assist in Wisconsin, and then when the following weekend in Minnesota, we had my animals, her animals, and my friend John Gray's animals with us. amounted to 30, and the girl at the border decided that since we had so many animals, we must be going to sell them and make a fortune, and therefore she denied us entry into the country. At that particular day, they were filming for the Border Control series, and the guys commented as we pulled up to secondary that, oh gee, I bet the guys would like to do guinea pigs, and guinea pigs were not chosen to be done on the TV program. And I think that annoyed the girl at customs, because I think she wanted to be the star of the day with her guinea pigs. And when that didn't happen, she got mixed, turned us around. So that's the only time that we've ever had any real issues. I have had them throw the feed out because they're on the feed. They read the feed label, and it said on the feed label that it had a certain percentage of fat in it. And at the time, there was a lot of the mad cow disease going around. I think like 3 cases in Canada or some ridiculously low number. And they were afraid that I was going to take my contaminated guinea pig feed into the United States and feed it to all the Americans and give them all mad cow disease. So they made me throw it out so that I wouldn't be tempted to do so. I, of course, am being exceedingly facetious because I don't intend to feed my guinea pig feed to my friends. That's the only issue I've had. They, like I said, they can turn them back if they wish. If you are buying a guinea pig and you want to bring it back into Canada, it's wise to get a receipt from the seller, so then you can declare it as a purchased animal, and they can tax it as a purchase coming into the country. They very, very seldom will do that because their main concern at the border is security, not tax collection. I could probably go on all day with funny border stories, but we won't bore.
Anything else, Amanda?
No, just people commenting.
Okay. Well, Mary Lou, thank you so much for joining us. Just an awesome job, as I knew you would, and thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
We're very happy to. And I want to give a pat on the back to Mary Lou. We were talking a little bit about before we came online tonight. Mary Lou and I were both at a show one time when the show forgot to set up the Cavy equipment. I look across the room and there's Mary Lou helping set up the Cavy table. So she's a very dedicated and loyal Cavy person. And I want to give a shout out too to our friends up in Canada. Every time I've been up to Ontario, love the hospitality. Some very, very fine folks up there, always enjoy it. And across Winnipeg and Manitoba, that's part of our district. And my trip up there, just awesome. I love seeing the Canadian members. It's a vital part to our district here, and we're definitely glad to have them. And we're glad to have Mary Lou joining us today from Ontario. So before we start our sign off, Amanda, one last chance. Anything else?
Thank you. Those kind of comments are coming through.
Well, great. We're glad to hear that. And I guess we'll start shutting down here. Again, I want to thank Mary Lou for joining us tonight. I want to give my usual shout out to our District 8 web team, Amanda Behe and Jane Burt. They do a lot of work to make these events happen, and I really appreciate their efforts. Also want to say thank you to everybody who joins us and watches these. Y'all are the reason we do these. We try and see that both the rabbit and the Cavy side is represented here. And, we've done 2 Cavies, and now we're going to go back to the rabbit side. Right now, we're looking out into August. I haven't got things firmed up there yet, but we are looking at it and doing some work. And hopefully, we'll have something announced on July the 27th when we're back here for Judge Ornsby speaking on Palominos. So with that, again, we'll say goodbye and thank you. Mary Lou, thank you. Amanda and Jane and everybody out there, thank you. Stay safe, my friends, and we'll see you around. Bye-bye.